First and foremost, thank you so much. It truly is wonderful to see so many familiar faces and names. I like to kick this series off just, owning and honoring the fact that it's a dream series for me, because the chance to showcase just the brilliant women who make Uvaro possible is such an incredible experience. And in this case, it is even more incredible and absolutely true because I get to showcase one woman in particular who is my sister, and that's Sheila Fung, who we're going to be speaking with today. And I know so many of you know her already, and you know how incredible she is. And so when I say that I am her biggest fan, that won't come as a surprise, I'm sure. So before I jump into the fun part and the reason why we're all here, I just wanted to emphasize that over the month of February, we have been speaking with some of the women who we have the honor of working with at Uvaro. Each of these women has achieved greatness in their own domain and career. Their success is not accidental. They didn't just fall into it. Each one is driven, humble, and authentic, and they are where they are today because of the decisions that they made and the actions they each took. And I share that because this is an opportunity to learn from those actions and replicate them ourselves, regardless as to who you are. And so it's so important to remember that this is a product of their efforts in this journey. This March, so this is our 4th of February series. This March, we're going to continue celebrating women in tech. And of course, we would love for you to join us. We're going to be hosting 2 panel discussions to highlight just the extraordinary women who continue to enable the Uvaro community to thrive. The first panel is going to be happening on March 10th, and this will feature the women who have taken our program. The second on March 24th will be joined by the people who teach the program, the women who teach the program. So we're going to be highlighting individuals who have taken the program, completed it, or at different stages, and then those who actually instruct, which is incredibly, incredibly exciting. There's going to be many familiar faces, so please stay tuned because registration details are going to come. All right, getting back to our regular programming. Today, February, when we kicked off this series, we spoke with Alex about understanding your why and why it's so important to do so in the context of career success. We then spoke with Elena about overcoming performance blocks. And then Jenna last week spent time with us to share her insight into building community and why that's so important in the workplace as well. Today, we're taking it one step further. This week's conversation is about continuous learning and perpetual growth. And we truly do have the best person possible to be speaking about this particular subject. So I'm going to take 2 more minutes, Sheila, embarrass you only a little bit, I promise, and then we can kick off into questions. How does that sound? Perfect. Thank you. Sheila, when I share with people that you're the most capable person I know and that you can overcome challenges like nobody else, I think that's actually an oversimplification of your superpower. I've been thinking about this leading up to this conversation because the reality is it's not just that you overcome challenges like nobody else. It's that you take on challenges like nobody else. The reason you've overcome them is because you take them on. And when I say that I've never seen anybody so gleeful to hear about a new obstacle to crush, I mean it. It's not a blessing that you're so capable. It's a byproduct of having been this way your entire life. As kids, every single time that you stood at the precipice of something dangerous and daunting, I would look at you terrified, and you would be standing there with a giant grin on your face, just, so excited to dig in and see what comes next. And I think there's a phrase for that. It's laughing in the face of danger. And the reality is you did, and you do now still. And the truth is, I loved it then. I love it now. Seeing a big sister be so fearless was so empowering, and it has shaped me. And for that, I'm truly grateful. So your appetite for welcoming challenge and the growth that comes as a result is insatiable. And that's why it's so exciting to be talking to you today. So I'm going to kick things off with a question. And I know I gave you a list of questions that I'm really going to throw in at you because this is not the first question on the list. I'd love to know, where do you think your insatiable desire to overcome challenges came from?
We're going off script with number 1. I like it. That was an incredible intro, Donna. Thank you for that, first off. And as you were describing that, I realized that I'm currently experiencing the full karmic circle as I watch my kids do that exact same thing and think, why do they always want to do the dangerous, challenging thing? So I know at least 2 people in this room are laughing at that. I feel like you deserve that, Sheila. So that's entertaining. Why am I like this? I ask myself that. It used to be daily. Now I'm going to say it's probably at least weekly. And when I think it's usually a bit more facetious. But if I were to try to understand where that drive comes from, I think it's actually that, and you'll relate to this, Donna, being taught at a very young age through, I think, both deliberate directives, but also through the stellar example of our older brother, really truly believing that we could do whatever the heck we wanted to. And I'm going to say that my mother and my father both, probably mom more so, were really deliberate about cultivating that belief, just that firm belief in self, that if you want to do a thing, you absolutely can. And then if you add in the chaotic nature of our growing up together, just the way we came up with ideas and thought, let's try this and give it a shot, I think that might have firmly cemented the belief that challenge is awesome. And the byproduct of surmounting challenge is, if nothing else, incredibly entertaining. And yeah, there were lots of bumps and injuries that came along with that. But I think that's probably where it started. It's the firm belief that came from the top down that you could do and try whatever the heck you wanted. And then just seeing the results that yielded from that, like some of the amazing things we were able to do from a very young age.
Yeah. I can certainly relate to that. All of the wild construction sites and all that stuff, and the bumps and injuries. So there's kind of two threads I'd love to pull on from that jump out to me. You mentioned, that idea of bumps and injuries that come along with it. And in so many cases, bumps and injuries are, that's what teaches us to not pursue challenges. It's what turns us away. And so how do you overcome the bumps and injuries that you get when you try something new and you put yourself out there?
Yeah. And this topic relates to so many of the things that we're going to dig into today. Just this idea that, whether it's bumps or bruises, whatever, failure, call it what it is, failure, and things going sideways and being proven wrong and finding out that your hypothesis was wildly incorrect, all of that stuff, it's so key to actually learning, doing, growing, all of that stuff. And I think that, we all went through the same public schooling system, and there's this process in place that teaches you to try to kind of fear and avoid failure. And this is very instinctive, to avoid the discomfort of what feels like failure. So how do I deal with that? I think maybe it's a miswiring of the brain, but I think because we were allowed to be so explorative when it came to learning and play, that very early on, we learned that if you want to do a thing, you're going to have to figure out how, and figuring it out requires failing a lot. Sometimes the failures are more spectacular than others, but I think not seeing it as a bad thing, but just a normal, natural part of the process was important.
Yeah, I love that. Failure is almost, that is the state of normal. Success is almost the extraordinary. And to think that we exist in a state of success as our normal, and failure is the absurdity, that is what's wrong, because the normal state is not doing it quite right. So I appreciate that a lot. Yeah. I think something else that you said really stood out to me, and then I'd love to get back to the question I wanted to ask you originally, I promise. You mentioned that so key to your ability is the belief in your ability to do something, to do anything. And that really stood out to me, because when I think about so many of the customers who come into our classroom, in a lot of cases, they're trying to find that belief in themselves to do something. And so what are some recommendations that you might make to people, or provide somebody who's looking to, maybe for the first time, believe in themselves to make this type of change?
Mm-hmm. I think I use the term repeatable success about at least 10 times a day. And I'm usually using it in the context of coaching. We're talking about sales tactics, career search, that kind of thing. And what I tell people in class is what they're seeking is a repeatable success, and that at the beginning of their career journey, when they're in the role, it can feel like you're, all over the place, and it's a little panicky. And then they nail that first meeting, or they close that first deal, and now you know that the success is repeatable. The same thing happens in their job search. And so when you come into the course, if there's people coming in who don't know what is possible, like that's our starting point. That's our bread and butter. It's mapping out all the possible paths they could take, trying to give them as much to work with as possible, just seeing what's been done, what's being done. If I were to try to expedite that process for anybody coming in or help anyone who's struggling with that first little bit of self-belief, I would say start having conversations, and the locus of your conversation should be to find out what has worked for other people, and then follow up, find out what has not worked for other people. And it just comes down to finding someone who is willing to share their experience, because once you hear what's been done and what's worked, it becomes much easier to see yourself doing the same. Then you have to go through that process of trying and failing and iterating and the growing pains, right? But finding the person that you can have some sort of connection with, even if it's just, one minor thing in common that you have, hearing how they came about and figured out what their process was, and then seeing how that maps to what you can do. I think that's the not just easiest, but fastest route to success path possible.
Yeah. It's that's great. It's mimicry, right? And that's what we do. We look to see what others have done, and then so when you learn a language, it's when you learn social cues. So I think it's a fantastic tactic. And kind of hearing your language and the words that you shared, there was really two things that we can do to help build that belief in ourselves. And the first is repeatable success, and that's setting small goals, small achievable goals every day for yourself, and acknowledging and recognizing when you've achieved those. And that resonates really well with what Alana shared as well. So I love that particular strategy. And then second, start having conversations. Oh my gosh, talk to people, ask for help, ask how they did it, listen. Just that simple act, which is even more poignant in a remote environment, especially such a COVID impacted environment. I think hearing that reminder is really, really important, because that also gives us connection in addition to that sense of belief. So I love those two recommendations. Thank you. So I promised to ask my original first question, and look, we're only 13 minutes in. Yeah. So I know your story intimately. You've been in my life 100% of it, but a lot of these people do not. So what is your story, and what got you to where you are today?
I'm going to approach that from two directions, because I see two parts to the question, and anybody who's been in my classroom knows I'm incapable of giving a one-word answer. So what's my story? I very early on learned that I could do whatever the heck I wanted to, sometimes to my detriment. But the other thing that I learned was that everybody knows this phrase: if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. At a young age, I thought, aha, this is the answer. I have to make sure that I don't just have a job. I have to love what I do. And so, because I also believe that anything worth doing is maybe worth overdoing a little bit, I spent about a decade out of post-secondary pursuing fiercely things that I love to do, and things that were meaningful to me, and the things that would give me that sense of self-fulfillment, because that was very high on my list of, if I wanted to love what I do, I have to feel self-fulfilled. And so I pursued everything at once that was meaningful to me. And if I were to map it into a timeline, it would look very strange, because I had multiple roles at any given point in time. I think actually this is the first time in my life I've had one job at a time, and I don't, because I also do something else. Anyway, I've never had one job at a time. That's what I've learned. And I pursued things like crisis intervention, nature conservancy. I would volunteer relentlessly. That's another thing my mother taught me very young. If you want to learn something, go volunteer. And that's the route, right? So I did a lot of that. And I allowed myself to focus so hard on this idea of self-fulfillment and connecting that to my work, that actually allowed it to distract me in a way from what was actually important to me. And how crazy is that? Right? So I hit this point where I was relentlessly pursuing this dream of business ownership and just trying to make impact in the martial arts community, health and fitness, and building these businesses. And I loved it, and I loved what I was doing. And I sincerely believed that so long as I loved what I was doing, nothing else really mattered. And then my life exploded. It exploded in all the worst ways you can imagine. It was sort of realizing that it not only was it not sustainable what I was doing, but that it was creating a scenario where I actually neglected the parts of me that were most important, like the self-development, the growth and learning. I was pouring myself into the businesses and my clients, helping them grow and learn. And I had 2 kids and that's not sustainable, clearly. So I realized that I needed to make big change and it needed to happen very quickly. So I took that first role in tech sales. And that first role, when I think about it now, very much a means to an end. It was, this is the role that's going to allow me to change the shape of my path, my career. I can do it on my own terms. I can do it remotely. I can right now cram it into the windows of time that I have between all of the other businesses I had going on. And at that time, I thought that the pivot that I was making was going to be letting go of that passion piece, the love what you do, the pursue what is meaningful. And I made that decision through necessity. And because it allowed me to focus on keeping things good and normal and happy for my kids, agency, all that kind of stuff. And I released it, and that was hard. You know, the thing I'd kind of held as my anchor for a decade. But through that transition, you go through, you know, everybody here is, or I shouldn't say everybody, many of the people in this room here have gone through a very similar process just by nature of deciding to make a career change. You kind of reform yourself, relearn, redraw, whatever you want to call it. And in that process, there was growth and learning. And then of course, opportunity. And the opportunity was to jump in and cover some classes with Uvaro. And I just jumped at it because instruction is a thing that I'd been, you know, to my core doing for about a decade. And I loved it. And not just the content, not just the format, but the transition that I got to be part of with everybody in the room, helping them through that same process I had just gone through myself, knowing that I was giving them maps and milestones and anchor points that I really wish I'd had when I went through it myself, and just knowing what would be possible out the other side. So the first half of your question, what's your story? You know, I got here through a very long circuitous route. Now that I'm here, it feels very much like the place that I am supposed to be. And the second part of your question was what got you here? I just described a chaotic mix of circumstance, opportunity, drive. I think the core of it, though, is pursuing the things that matter. And then the second part of that is just an incredible supportive network of people who are willing to help with that growth and learning and act as a launch pad, because I can't even explain how much I've learned just through the people I've met in this space. It's been an incredible process.
So many things to love about that answer, and I'm not biased.
It's very long.
Yeah, no, it was perfect. Actually, hearing your comments, something that you shared in that, the idea that you love what you're doing, you're learning alongside the people who you're in the classroom with, and you're doing that from the instructor lens. And what I love so much about that answer is that as long as you, or what's implicit in it, as long as you are continuing to learn and level yourself up and take on new challenges, then you're always going to be learning alongside the classroom. They're going to be going through a journey, you're going through a journey. And it's in parallel, going through this journey together, that you're able to enrich each other's experiences. And so arguably, you'll never get bored.
It's the perfect feedback loop.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I mean, I'm always thinking about that. So that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. It's very, very helpful. What you just shared, like you said, it's circuitous, nonlinear. I'd love to know, what is the role of goals and direction when pursuing this messy, perpetual cycle of growth?
Right. So I have such a history when it comes to goals and, you know, mapping them and breaking things into smaller pieces. And it's, I laugh when I think about this topic, because I can't count the number of people who I've told, you need to articulate your goal, and it can be huge. And then you need to break that down into small, manageable pieces, and you need to map it out to a timeline, because if you don't, it's just an idea. And if it's just an idea, while they're great, they're not going to happen. You have to turn it into a reality. And to do that, you have to break it into manageable, bite-sized pieces, because, you know, I mentioned that anything worth doing is worth overdoing. I feel the same way about goals. Goals should be big. They should be important to you. And then you break them down into the micro goals. What role do they play in terms of your ability to grow? I think that they're key, and that they're the base of it. You know, without the actual mapping, it's just ideation. And I see a huge like a huge room for ideation. I love going through that process of just thinking and imagining and trying to think what I could be aspiring to. But it's that process of backfilling the map to get there that's key to actually producing the result. Did that answer your question though? I don't know if I went off on a tangent because I talk about goals with so many people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, new objective. Let's organize our thoughts. No.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that was perfect. And, you know, it's interesting because we encounter so many folks who are they're at a start of a journey. Like you said, where you yourself went through a transition and it was a means to an end. That was the goal at the time. But then at some point that changed. And at some point it became, oh, there's meaning here. This could be more fulfilling to me. This resonates again. I found myself. I've relearned, like you mentioned. And so as somebody who might be going through the program where they've got a goal where it's okay, I just gotta get to the first class. Okay, I just gotta get to the second class. How can they manage that process of evolving their goals? How can they think critically about their goals? And what signs should they be looking for to know that they're ready?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that question. Also off script, but I like it. So I think in terms of signs, overwhelm is a very important trigger that we should pay attention to. Okay. Because any growth, of course, requires being a white belt, coming in and just being like, I don't know what I'm doing. Somebody help me. But when you start to crack into new content, new subject matter, and in this case, new industry, new space, new tools, new, like so much. When you start to crack into that, it produces this feeling of just like drowning. It's overwhelming. It's like there's way too, but I'd be very clear. It's like telling your brain you're going to try to absorb the entire internet. It's not possible. You can't, well, yet. Crap. Okay. So
Cranial upload.
Right, exactly.
Wrong chat.
Sorry, wrong space. We're not asking you to do that, and you shouldn't expect that of yourself, to just immediately have mastery of something that, if I were to try and quantify it, the only comparison I can come up with is like the entire internet. We're not asking you to do that. Recognize when you're feeling that drowning feeling, recognize the overwhelm, and then also remind yourself that it's the goals, the milestones, they will act as anchor points. Okay. If the overwhelm is there, my first line of defense is please flag it. Tell your instructor, tell someone from the community, talk to one of your peers. I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's okay. What you're going to find is there's little micro goals along the way. And it might be as simple as start your LinkedIn account, get your contact number past 100. Like, that's a good goal. Get it past 500. That's another goal. Just little micro steps along the way. Because as you go through the process of achieving those tiny little goals, all of the other stuff catches up. You learn to use the new tools because you have to in order to achieve the micro goal. As you adopt those new tools, the next one becomes easier. Your network starts to grow as a result. As your network grows, you have the conversations, you hear what's been done, you hear where the growth is happening, and it's a learning, absorbing process. And suddenly you'll be like, oh, I achieved that goal, and you won't have noticed all the other stuff that happened at the same time. Advice-wise, that's the route that I'd go.
Yeah. Recognizing the overwhelming feeling and seeing it for what it is. Overwhelming is not failure. Those are not the same things, but our sweat glands, the adrenal, all that stuff makes us feel and create that association where it's, we've linked this feeling of overwhelm to fear and failure, and they're not the same by any stretch. So I love that comment.
Very different. I would put overwhelm in the category of like really good signs. Because if you're not running into some feeling of overwhelm, there's the potential for maybe being too comfortable.
Right.
You
yes.
can't have
comfort
that.
zones. No. Right. That's change doesn't happen there. There's when I was listening to a CBC podcast, an author, I think it's Oliver Berkman. I looked it up. He wrote a book, launched it recently, 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. And what he mentioned was when you're feeling overwhelmed or there's so many things on your plate, remember, you only ever need to do the next one thing. And you get to choose what that is.
Okay, I love this. And I love that reference in my brain is actually from Frozen 2.
You know what? He probably took it from
no, I'm pretty sure it went the other way.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that made me happy.
Yeah. We know which one has kids, right? Perfect. So I love that answer. You mentioned overwhelm as a symptom. It's a good symptom. It's outside your comfort zone. How do I know if I'm succeeding at something?
Oh, well, just default. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you're succeeding. No, it's too simple. That's way too simple. The easiest route is that incremental, measurable success. And I think this ties back to the idea of why we need goals and why they're so central to making growth happen. Because if you're not tracking it, if you're not measuring, how do you know? Where is the growth coming from? So in just about every aspect that I can think of life, there are things that you can measure, even if the measure is a subjective check-in. I am a firm advocate of journaling. It's something that is on my radar that I need to be better at. Through my entire life, it's a thread of like, I'm journaling really well and things are moving along, and then I stop journaling and things are not moving along. Reality is I'm just not aware. I'm just not aware of where I'm succeeding and where things are moving forward. Writing it down, tracking it, measure as many things as you can. That's the piece that will force into your conscious awareness that you are succeeding. And I want to stress that I'm not seeing success as a polar opposite to failure. The two things tie in together. Even if I'm iterating repeatedly and failing, as long as there is progress happening, I see that as success as well. So my primary recommendation would be to measure everything, write it down, journal regularly.
Yeah. 1,000% journaling helps me, or writing things down helps me. But we also have a wonderful Alex Parks joining us today, and she is a phenomenal career coach. And one of the benefits that I've learned about career coaching from her is that is in part what a coach can do. There's continuity from conversation to conversation. There's reflection where, you said this to me last time. Where are you? How have you progressed? Or rather, I've seen you progress. And it serves a similar function. And I've seen the outcomes and the results as well. So I'd say that's definitely evidence to underscore your comments. Awesome. What are some ways that you stay motivated? How do you do it?
That weird miswiring of my brain. No, I'm kidding. How do I stay motivated? I do find that the measurable success goes a very long way to just providing its own fuel. And it's one of those, measure everything regularly, because then no matter what's going on, there's going to be somewhere in the metrics that you're tracking measurable success. And that goes a very long way to keep things motivated. But I have always described the lack of, like when I lose motivation, when I'm feeling like, oh, I just don't have the energy, I describe it as trying to pour from an empty cup. It's that feeling of like, I just don't have anything left to give. And the solution for that is quite simple, of course. It's just to pour into your own cup. And what that looks like, it's different for everybody. I'm blessed. I have, so much love in my household that it's like, if I'm feeling demotivated, I can literally, figuratively raise my hand, lie down on the floor, one of the dog or the cat or the two, somebody's going to climb on top of me. And all of a sudden I'm not feeling so terrible. It's like, you need to pour something into your own cup, whether that's just human contact, connection. It's the thing you do for yourself. It's always the animals. Anything, just something that is giving to you. Because from my position, if I'm feeling a lack of motivation and I'm starting to feel like I don't have the energy, it's a symptom of just pouring outward too much.
Yeah, lots of analogies. The cup and capacity is definitely a powerful one. And I appreciate that. I'd love to know, you mentioned this much earlier in your conversation, just kind of the support network and how asking for help is so important. How does somebody's network, how can you leverage it to help you on a journey when you're just getting started? What are some specific ways you can do that?
Yeah, there's so many ways. And a very cool thing about just people in general is, I won't say across the board 100%, but the majority of people in this world are very open and willing to help, offering help. And I think anybody in this room, if somebody were to ask you for help, if you could, you would probably say, yeah, how can I help? So when it comes to leveraging the network, I think being real in your connection, authentic with what you're asking for, but being willing to ask and being very clear. If what you need is just familiarity with the space, you can ask for that. If you're running into a problem that you don't know how to deal with, just a scenario in your workplace that you're not sure how to address, you can lead with that and ask. And you might not get response from some people, but you will definitely get response from others. So I don't even really consider it leveraging. It's what is it there for? It is support. You give back It's like a reciprocity scenario where you should just feel comfortable asking for what help you need and giving what help you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Asking and giving. Someone asked me recently what the definition of generosity is, and it's the more you have, the more you have to share. And so I think that that's a really salient point, that it is that relationship bidirectional. I'm always keeping an eye on the clock, and we have taken you a minute over our allotted time. Thank you, Sheila, so much. Amazing, and personally, professionally, to be here and hearing from you, such an inspiration on both levels. And I'm the only human in the world who can benefit from that, because I'm your only little sister. So I also feel great and special because that's the case. So thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much, Donna. That was fun.
Awesome. And huge thank you to everybody here who made that possible, our customers, our teammates, everybody. I'm just going to do one last reminder before everybody goes. March is going to be an even more incredible month, because we're going to continue celebrating the women in tech, and we would love for you to join us. We're going to be hosting 2 panel discussions where we highlight the extraordinary women who take the program, who are part of our integral network, and then of course the people who instruct, which is incredible to hear their perspectives, because they have such an influence over this next generation of professionals. So our first panel is on March 10th. We will feature the women who have taken our program. Our second panel is on March 24th, and we will be joined by the people who lead our program and teach it. There will be familiar faces, absolutely. So please stay tuned. We would love it for you to join us.